relationships. Sociology is a science. There are two broad categories of science: the physical sciences like math, physics, and chemistry, and the social sciences. In which category do you think that sociology belongs? Yes, sociology is of course one of the social sciences. Other social sciences are anthropology, economics, history, political science, geography, and psychology. These sciences deal with man's relationships to his physical, social, and cultural environments. Sociology draws upon the other social sciences and in return contributes the knowledge it gains to their store of information. This is possible because the other social sciences are involved with specific aspects of social behavior, while sociology is broadly involved with all the relationships among human beings. Sociology may be defined as the study of social groups. It is the study of the relationships among group members and the way these relationships change. For example, psychologists and sociologists are both interested in the problems of alcoholism. But the psychologist would be most interested in the cause and treatment of the individual alcoholic, while the sociologist would be most interested in studying an alcoholic's relationships with groups such as his family, friends, or fellow workers. How would you describe a sociologist's interest in one person? Yes, sociology must be distinguished from social work. A social worker is a person who helps families and individuals through government or private agencies, such as welfare or adoptive agencies. The study of social work is a separate field from the science of sociology with its own course of study. How would you describe their relationship? Yes, social workers do study some sociology, however. You might say that the sociologist tries to learn the causes of social behavior, while the social worker tries to apply this knowledge. The social worker, in return, may occasionally supply certain information to the social scientist. Sociology has been defined as a science, but perhaps the word science makes you think of test tubes, chemicals, and formulas. Do you think sociology can really be a science without test tubes and chemicals? Yes, sociology is a science because, like chemists and physicists, sociologists use the scientific method in their research. Scientists use three basic steps when they research answers to problems. These steps in the scientific method are developing a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, and reporting the results. How does a social scientist use the scientific method to solve a problem? First, he must develop a hypothesis, or a logical guess that might answer his problems. For example, various sociologists have studied the effect of the death penalty on the crime rate. A hypothesis about this problem might be, capital punishment does not effectively deter serious crime. What is the second step in the scientific method? Yes, the sociologist must test his hypothesis. Of course, the sociologist does not perform a laboratory experiment like a chemist. Instead, he studies available data and statistics, possibly with the aid of a computer. In this case, he would compare data on serious crime in areas which enforce capital punishment and in those which do not. The sociologist would probably limit the research. Perhaps he or she would compare the crime rates in a few states which have used the death penalty with the rates in several states that have not. This limiting is called a sample. The scientist must try to ensure a fair and representative sample. The sociologist must establish a research design to control all the factors or variables that might prevent him from discovering whether his hypothesis is true or false. In the study discussed here, for example, one variable would be the population of the states. A heavily populated state might have a larger number of serious crimes than a less populated state. How could the population variable be controlled? Right. After the research design has been established, the variables controlled, and the data studied, The sociologist can begin to draw conclusions. If the data shows that there is as much serious crime, homicide for example, in states with the death penalty as in states without it, the hypothesis that capital punishment does not effectively deter serious crime is supported. What is the final step in the scientific method? Yes, the scientist would probably publish a report of the findings, whether they supported the hypothesis or not, in a scientific journal so others could learn about his theories and research. The scientist's objective is to add to knowledge, not to prove personal theories. Sociology is a relatively new science. The basis for the study of sociology was established during the 17th and 18th centuries when philosophers considered the questions of order and conflict in society. The name sociology was invented by Auguste Comte, a French philosopher. Comte was opposed to religion and believed man, through science, would come into an age of enlightenment free from illusion. He believed the purpose of sociology was to discover the laws of social order and the ways to best maintain that order. Who coined the term sociology? Yes, sociology was developed by French philosophers, German thinkers, and others in the United States. The golden age of sociology, when most of the fundamental ideas were established, was between 1890 and 1930. When was the basis of sociology developed? Right. Out of the social turmoil created by the Industrial Revolution came three men who were to have an important influence on sociological thought. They were Herbert Spencer, Karl Marx, and Emil Durkheim. Herbert Spencer was the first to work out a systematic theory of the workings of society. He believed in the survival of the fittest, that those who had wealth and power had proven their fitness and deserved their position. He believed in progress and thought it should come about through evolutionary change, not through government intervention. If Herbert Spencer were alive today, do you think he would be in favor of such government assistance as unemployment compensation? Right. Karl Marx differed with Spencer. He believed that the only way to solve the problems created by an industrial society was by political revolution. In 1848, Marx and Friedrich Engels published their ideas in a book titled The Communist Manifesto. Which of these programs would Marx favor? Yes. Although most people probably think of Marx only in terms of his effect on communism, he did have an important influence on social theory. He was the first to develop a theory about the importance of economics in the social structure. The last of the three men influential in the development of sociology, Emil Durkheim, published a study in 1897 on the causes of suicide. This study became famous because it showed that sociology could aid the understanding of a social problem, as well as explain patterns of social behavior. The suicide study is also important because of the research techniques Durkheim used to acquire and analyze sociological data. Durkheim collected and studied suicide statistics from various European countries, believing that not all suicides were due to mental illness or emotional disturbances. He attempted to show a relationship between social integration, or the degree to which persons felt themselves to be part of a group, and suicide. Why was Durkheim's study important? Durkheim was able to show that there were more suicides in cities than in rural areas, and more among unmarried than among married persons. He argued that a person who felt strong ties to groups, such as family or church, was less likely to commit suicide than a person who felt all alone. Durkheim identified three main types of suicide: the egoistic, the anomic, and the altruistic suicide. The egoistic suicide may result when a person feels deprived of being part of a family or any other kind of group. Which of these factors did Durkheim identify as an important element in explaining suicide? Durkheim also found that a society characterized by anomie, which is normlessness or confusion and contradiction in basic social roles, is likely to experience an increase in suicides. He suggested that under conditions of anomie, A person might no longer know what is expected or identify with a particular group. This situation might occur after a defeat in war or in an economic depression. What is the name for another type of suicide identified by Durkheim? Yes, one type of suicide, which Durkheim called altruistic, was related to social integration in a different way. In the altruistic suicide, a person has such strong ties to a group that he will sacrifice himself for them. During World War II, Japanese kamikaze pilots deliberately flew their planes into enemy battleships. This is an example of which type of suicide? Right. Early European sociologists often were humanitarians who wanted to correct social ills rather than just develop knowledge. Thus, sociology became synonymous with social reform, especially in the United States. This interest in social reform made the study of sociology appealing to Americans because during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, America was concerned with several social problems. After the Civil War, the economy of the South was destroyed while the North was rapidly industrializing. Cities were expanding, the westward movement was occurring, and large numbers of immigrants had to be absorbed into the American society. Many Americans were having difficulty adjusting to these changes. There was unemployment, prejudice, political corruption, crime, slums, and family breakdowns. The list was and is quite long. It seemed that a scientific study of sociology might lead to some answers. The fact that sociology has concerned itself with social reform has caused sociologists to consider these questions. Is it the chief objective of the social scientist to remain impartial, conduct studies, analyze data, and add to scientific knowledge? Or should he take an active part in applying that knowledge to heal society's ills? It is not easy for society or for the sociologist to decide his role. Early in the century, why were many Americans interested in sociology? The science of sociology is a broad field, however, and there is room for much variation in the interpretation of the role of a sociologist. A scientist may be an advocate of a cause if he is careful to do his research objectively. Some sociologists feel their roles should be those of pure scientists only. How might a sociologist with a different point of view consider his role? Yes, sociology is not a science as pure and precise as mathematics, nor does sociology have a blueprint or a master plan for an earthly paradise. But the study of sociology does give us further understanding of people as social beings. There are sound reasons why you can benefit from studying sociology. A study of sociology should provide you with an insight into social relationships. By understanding the relationships within groups, races, and cultures, and the social forces influencing them, prejudice can be reduced. There are many practical applications of sociological findings to politics, psychology, and economics. An understanding of sociological principles can be applied to such diverse endeavors as predicting political elections, preventing juvenile delinquency, and even improving relationships within an office, factory, or family. Sociology does have practical applications within your life. If you should become interested in this field and wish to pursue it further, there are rewarding careers in social work, government, industry, and teaching. And even if you do not go beyond this series of programs, you may become a more interesting and understanding person and a more effective member of the groups to which you belong.